This is my family's farm here in Berthoud, Colorado. We've been raising meat here since 2007. A bank of neighbors didn't like living next to a farm, even though we had been here for 6 or 7 years by the time they moved in. They couldn't shut down most of what we did, but they could shut down our poultry operation. And they did. They did. All it takes is one phone call if you're violating land use code. And we interpreted the land use as to apply to large industrial farms. We didn't think it applied the way it was written. We didn't think it applied to small farms. So that was our mistake for not clarifying that with the county before we started our farm. But yeah, we got shut down and we actually had to remove birds from the property until we got the land use code changed. The way Larimer County's was written, they allowed livestock, so that's your four-legged critters are considered livestock. So they allowed 10 animals per acre. Didn't matter what it was, sheep, pigs, cows, horses are treated differently, but for livestock, you could have 10 per acre, but you couldn't have poultry unless it was for your own personal use. So you couldn't raise anything commercially if you were gonna sell a product of any kind. So if you wanted to sell feathers, you wanted to sell live chickens, you wanted to sell eggs, you couldn't do that anywhere in Larimer County. Zero, nowhere. Raise your hand if you're buying eggs from your neighbor, right? So I did petition the county. They all kind of looked at me like I was nuts. And I realized I'm not gonna be able to pull this off on my own. They just think I'm the crazy chicken lady. So I need to get community support to back this up for the county to recognize that there's a need for poultry production in our county. So I joined the advisory board. I had already been a member of Rocky, and that year at the convention, I stood up and I had a line about family poultry farms added to our state policy book. So that meant Rocky, as an organization, supported small family farms raising poultry for meat and eggs. Once I got it into Rocky Mountain Farmers Union's policy book, then I knew that they would support me and I would get other Rocky members to be able to support me, meeting with the county to get the land use code changed. So that kind of was huge. We had several meetings over the course of, it took 3 years to change the land use code, but a piece of that was that the county was actually rewriting the entire land use code. They were going through the whole thing, modernizing pieces of it, but there was a huge push on ag, on how can we write this better to actually support ag in our county better. And so I helped drive that. Other members of Rocky were with me throughout that whole process, but it was really key in the meetings we had with the county to have representatives from Rocky Mountain Farmers Union there to back up my statements, right? And in a lot of these kind of meetings, when you're working with the county, they're very structured meetings, and you as an individual will get, your 3-minute window to speak, and that's all you get, right? You don't get to speak again. So having other folks be able to either reiterate my statements, back up my statements, or make other supporting statements, because I was gonna get my 3 minutes and that was all I was gonna get. So that was really helpful as well. It's one of the greatest pieces of being part of Rockies, that we're all a community together and we're all supporting each other, and that policy book is our guide, right? It's how we get there. It's how we support each other. If you put yourself in their shoes, they're trying to write a land use code that supports the community. And if I'm the only one showing up saying, I want to raise chickens, they're like, we're not going to change the whole land use code for you, right? But when the community shows up and says, this is something that we want for our community, and there's folks at Rocky that are really good at speaking government speak. They're really good at speaking in those situations eloquently and with data and information, and having them be able to come in and say, we've seen something similar in a different county and this is how it went down. Having that knowledge come into the room is helpful too. Having Rocky be able to present that voice of farming to the county so they can do their job to help support us better, but we can come in and help educate, right? And so that's a lot of what Rocky does on the policy side, is that folks might not understand either what farmers need for support in that kind of legislative area, or they don't understand how maybe a law that they've written, how it impacts us. So they need folks to come in to be that expert, educate them in the moment about why this is important, why we need to change language on something, and then get that language changed, and then those folks get to move on to the next thing. Our country 150 years ago probably had a whole lot of legislative types that lived on farms. Do they anymore? right? How many of our elected officials live on farms and understand what it is that we're going through? So it is important to have groups like Rocky that can be that voice where it's not coming from the people themselves anymore.